What's up, everybody? What is up? Hope you guys all having a good Monday night. Start of a new week. Start of a new week, guys. Hope everybody's doing well. Charlie will be on. He'll be on shortly. Actually, he's just about getting home, and then he's going to jump on to join us with Dr. Darragh O'Carroll. Dr. Darragh O'Carroll will join us tonight. Lots to talk about. Dr. O'Carroll has been following COVID for a long, long time, and he's got the data, he's got the statistics. We got the new O variant, uh, Omicron, or whatever the heck it's called. A lot of wow, oh there we go. Oh, Doc is on. All right, we'll bring him in a few seconds. So yeah, a lot of information floating around, guys, regarding that new variant out there from South Africa. And depending who you listen to our leaders, you listen to our lieutenant governor. Don't worry about it. Relax, enjoy, go join your gatherings, have a good time, relax, and we're in a good place. Is his favorite words. It's the same thing. Doctor uh, Libby Char says we're in a good place. Well, remember, guys, we're in a good place before Delta came. So I am concerned. Am I freaking out? I'm not freaking out, but I am definitely concerned. We still don't know what this thing will do, but we know that if we don't protect and secure our borders, then bad things can happen. So we'll wait and see, and I will bring in Dr. O'Carroll in because I want to hear him. We haven't seen him in a while, so let me bring him in here. There we go, Doc. You look different, man. What You got the spectacles.
Yeah, no. Been staring at the screen for a lot today, so it just helps take the strain off. So good to see you and good to see everyone.
Well, thanks for jumping on, man. I know it's been a while. Let me make sure I get my thing going here. Yeah. It's been a while since we've had you on, and glad to have you back. Happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all of that for you and your family, my friend.
Yeah, likewise. I hope you had a good one, Mel. Did you get some good food in there?
Oh yeah, always the case. Went to my brother's house. Really good mix of American Filipino
Oh,
delicacies. So we had a good time. We had a good meal. Very
nice.
safe meal. Very small group, and yeah, we had a good time. So
Good.
Charlie is coming on. Charlie was working a little late, so he'll be popping on a little bit. So, man, I don't even know where to start. I think you heard a little bit of what I was saying, that Omicron has been identified out of South Africa. Now it's in several countries. The World Health Organization today said, hey, we got to really pay attention and be safe. It's very concerning. Our lieutenant governor today, again, totally different approach. We're in a good place, and all of the experts that I have tried to research today is basically saying we better be careful and we better prepare because we just don't know. It's too soon. So I know you're a hell of a researcher and a very good provider of factual scientific data. So I'm
Sure.
excited, man. I'm excited. What you been up to? I'm gonna have to stall a little bit because most of our
Sure.
viewers come on at 7.
Yep.
So I want to make sure everyone gets to hear you in its entirety. So what you been up to? How's it
Uh,
going? You're on
yeah.
the
No,
Big Island, right?
no. I'm still on
Oahu.
Hawaii.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Oahu. Yeah.
yeah. I actually took a little time off. I had an eye surgery. I had a danger of growing up Irish in Hawaii. I had a skin cancer on my eyelid that I had to get removed, and then plastic surgery afterwards. So now I can tell my fiance I have a good side.
Yeah.
I've got plastic surgery. So, but it's all out. It wasn't the scary kind cancer, so it's gone. Yeah, so I just got to continue to be careful out in the sun, and it's not like I wasn't careful growing up. It's just I should be a redhead basically, and you got to just be careful growing up in Hawaii. So other than that, yeah, I've been good. I had a great Thanksgiving. Yeah, and looking forward to some reflection with the new year coming up and 2022 and seeing what we can do to make it better than 2021 and the year before. So Yeah, not much.
Well, glad you're doing better. You had us a little worried for a little bit, and so glad. And we all should be concerned about being out in the sun too much without protection. I think a lot of us just take that for granted, and we should all be at least be cognizant of it and make sure if we're going to be out in the sun for any length of time that we use
Yeah,
sunscreen. It's that
yeah.
simple.
Yeah, I've gotten now into the habit. My dermatologist scolded me that anytime, just in the morning, I just put on sunscreen anytime. So if I end up walking out of the house, I already have it on. So for
Yeah.
me, that's what works best because I'm in a hurry to get out of the house, and then I forget to put it on, and then I get too lazy. So yeah, if that works for people, then if you've got any sort of, especially if you've got any sort of fair skin like me, or you've got any Holly in there, definitely should. Just because the longer we are exposed and the longer you live on this earth, the more radiation you're exposed to, that just higher risk of getting it anywhere. So
All right. All right. All right. Well, it's close enough, man. It's close enough to
okay,
7.
sure.
COVID. It is almost 2 years. We've been really, I hate to say, to hell and back, and just as things were, I won't say getting to a good place, but I would say that it was stabilizing, and people were, knowing what to expect, and the direction. I still believe we were rushing into reopening, but that's nor here nor there. It was done, but now
Mm,
we got the new variant. I call them the old variant, Omicron or whatever the
yeah.
heck.
Oh, you
The
got it right there.
Omega,
Yeah, Omicron.
the Omega,
Um,
the Omega. I don't know who comes up with these names, but it would have been
yeah,
cooler just to say Omega, the Omega variant. But they
yeah.
went with Omicron. What's your take, Doc? What's your take? And I, I'm sure you're up on all the numbers and the new data that came out
Sure.
today, but maybe you
Uh,
can just start giving us an overview.
sure. As usual, I come bearing slides. Is this a good time to open it up and start them?
Absolutely,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely.
Share screen. Allow. Are you guys seeing my screen now?
We are now.
Yes. Okay. Let's do this. How about now?
Yep,
Yep.
there we go.
Okay.
Beautiful.
All right. All right. What do we need to know about this new variant? And then don't forget that Delta is still around and the king thus far. Um, I think if anybody says anything with certainty, then they're doing themselves a disservice. I think the ultimate wisdom is knowing what you don't know, and there's a lot that we don't know at this very, very early stage of this virus emerging from South Africa. So, with that being said, everything I could say during these next 20 to 22 slides could be completely different by tomorrow. There's just we haven't had enough time, and the needed studies take a week to 2 weeks to really kind of parse out, both from an epidemiological standpoint and then also from the lab and virological standpoint. So please take this with a grain of salt, that this all could change, and I could be singing a different tune by tomorrow. But the three things that we're really trying to decipher is this variant more transmissible? Does it cause more severe disease, and does it have a capacity to evade immunity and vaccines and cause some sort of reinfection? And even if all of these were true, would this be a complete reset to March of 2020? And the answer is no, because one thing is that we have tests. And if anybody is very interested in reading a really, really, really terrific book by Dr. Jonathan Dworkin, he really detailed how it was a struggle in the beginning to just even get tests. And so we were flying blind. But we have those now. We have existing immunity to this type of virus. We have upcoming antivirals, and we know how to treat it with steroids, less ventilation, or excuse me, less intubation, less mechanical ventilation. And we know that masks work, and then we know that opening our windows and getting ventilation into our houses, our schools, our restaurants, and being outdoors is definitely beneficial. So it's definitely not a reset if all those three things were true. Here is the genetic sequence of Delta, and each of these little black tick marks with the letters next to it and gray ones are the mutations in Delta compared to the original wild type strain that emerged out of originally Wuhan. A couple of notable ones are these two here in the receptor binding motif and the receptor binding domain. That's basically where the spike protein on the edge of the coronavirus attaches to our cells and gains entry. And then another one here at where the spike protein is cleaved and the virus actually gains entry into the cell. And so Delta's picked these three up among others. These are all, a lot of them are very important, but these three ones have allowed it to be more infective and more transmissible. And some of the ones over here that are highlighted in gray doesn't mean that they're not important, allow it to kind of replicate a bit faster. And just on visual appearance, this is Omicron. And it looks a lot different, right, Mel? You can see there's a lot more mutations, especially in this green region, which is the spike protein. And there's 15 different mutations in the area where it binds to our cells, and also the predominant area where our antibodies bind and try and block the virus from getting into our cells. And so it shares some of the same mutations as Delta, plus a host of some of the other variants that we've seen. And I'll go through a list of those. But just on a visual appearance, it's got a lot more mutations. But a lot more mutations don't necessarily mean it's a worse virus. Some of those mutations can work against it. Some mutations that we thought may be beneficial, when you put more mutations next to them, they may not be as beneficial. So there's a lot of work to do, and some of the studies we know thus far are computational and in the computer and laboratory. And does that translate into the real world yet? So we don't know the answers to that. This is what it looks like, the spike protein. We've all seen sort of pictures of it. This is from the side and this is from the top. It's almost triangular. But these are the ones in the receptor binding motif that we're concerned about, that make it more likely to attach to our cells and more likely to evade antibodies. This one over here, that's numbered 2, gives it a little bit of a signature that we can track it better. So that's actually a good thing. And then some of these others help it evade immune responses and antibodies that may attach from this angle of the protein, of the spike protein. This one helps it evade other antibodies. So you can see there's a host of different. This is definitely a different spike protein compared to what we're used to seeing out in the wild, so to speak. Here's again a list of all the mutations of Omicron, and here's alpha, beta, gamma, and delta, and it shares some of each. And here's a color-coded version of red are mutations that we've seen in prior variants of concern. These yellow ones are ones that we've flagged on a laboratory or computational level that could have some significant effect. These ones are near our monoclonal antibodies, and I'll get into those a bit later. And then these purple ones also have a pretty severe effect. And these blue ones, we're not really entirely sure what they're going to be doing and in what combination they're going to affect the other mutations. And before we start talking about antibodies, it's important to know that antibodies aren't binary, meaning like they don't attach all the way and they don't attach, it's not a yes-no type of decision. Some antibodies attach to different spots of the spike protein. So imagine this is the tip of the spike protein. I'm sorry, it doesn't look like it. But this antibody may bind to this part of the spike protein that is triangular, and this one might bind to the circular region, and this might bind to the square or rectangle region. And so changes in the mutational on the molecular level to the spike protein may change this to more of a square or more of a circle. So this binds less tightly, but it could bind some. Or it can change it completely, which might be the case in, not completely, but significantly, that this doesn't bind well to it as well. So when we talk about antibody responses, it's a polyclonal response. So you get all these different types of antibodies that can block or bind to the antigen or to the end spike protein and keep it from working properly. So it's not a yes/no. It's more of a kind of, you've got to take it all into context. And so here are some of the mutations that we are seeing. And the ones in red, I'm just going to go through, are ones that we've seen in prior variants, but also we haven't really seen them all together. And so this is the different mutation on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, this is the percentage or predicted percentage of escape from our immune response that we're going to see. So quite significantly, 484, that was in the in P1, we saw that it has some, if the antibody was to bind to this region of the spike protein and it had this mutation, it would most likely, up to this looks like it's between 0.3 and 0.4, so it would be somewhere, significant effect to our immune system. And then also these as well in 417 and 446 look like they're going to have some effect as well. And so this is what it looks like on, like I was showing, the triangle, square, and circle. There's different classes of antibodies depending on where they bind to the spike protein. Class 1 isn't, more important than class 2 or class 3. Class 1 and 2 bind to the receptor binding domain, and class 3 bind to other areas of the spike protein. But we can see here that 417 and 484 and 446 are going to really affect their different classes of antibodies. So predictably, on a molecular level, this is why so many alarms were kind of talked about when they saw the sequence, because we do know on a computational level, and most of this knowledge comes from, we're basically putting this spike protein into a supercomputer, and then we're asking it to say, hey, look, what are our antibody responses going to do if it mutates here and here and here? And that's what we're seeing, is these sort of escape phenomena. Regarding our monoclonal antibodies, so what you get when you get a monoclonal antibody, mono means singular or one, is just one type of antibody, sometimes two, depending on what you're getting. But it looks like this virus, we have to see it in the real world, but on a molecular level, we can anticipate that possibly the Eli Lilly monoclonal antibodies are going to look, this 484 is almost 100% escape. This 417 is almost 100% escape. So this Eli Lilly monoclonal antibodies, which we're not using that much anymore anyway, because we've seen some of these mutations, may not be quite effective. Also, the Regeneron that a lot of people are getting may take a hit as well, because Regeneron is actually two different antibodies, and it's not a polyclonal response like our natural immune system or what we get when we get a vaccine. But this secondary, or this second component of Regeneron, may take quite a hit because of this mutation, G446. So that's how it's going to affect monoclonals. When did it come about? Probably the chain here, this is Omicron, probably the ancestor came about somewhere in actually June of 2020, almost a year ago. But this specific virus, they think, and this could change as well, emerged somewhere probably in September to October, and has been kind of bubbling around somewhere in Sub-Saharan Africa. And the reason why we're saying somewhere is that it was first detected in South Africa, because they have a remarkably robust surveillance system, and they have to, because they have a lot of infectious disease in South Africa, and to keep everything at bay, they have a very robust public health and infectious disease wing to their government, and also to the private sector. So they're very, very good, and it should be commended that they released the information so quickly. But the rates of HIV in Sub-Saharan Africa, you can see this purple is up near 25% for adults. It's really, really, really high. And we do know that chronic infections in people with any sort of immunosuppression, so HIV definitely takes down your immune system, or somebody who's got an organ transplant that's on immunosuppressives, or somebody who's got a blood cancer where they can't fight things well, or somebody who's less so, somebody who's on chemotherapy. But those who are on chronic immunosuppressive states, it's basically like the virus has a chance to kind of run wild and fight somebody that's a little bit weaker, and find the weak points in our immune system. And so there's been documentations of people having COVID infections for close to a year, consistently having positive viral cultures. So that's likely where it emerged from, is somebody somewhere in Sub-Saharan Africa with a chronic HIV infection. You combine that with the fact that extreme vaccine inequity, this is the rates of vaccines per population. And you can see that Africa is just so sparse. And so that is something that needs to absolutely be addressed. And that's one thing that I would like our viewers to take home, is that we're not safe until we're all safe, right? Because we do know, and we predicted, that variants can emerge from anywhere. And our world is so globalized that if it pops up anywhere, it's going to go everywhere. So that's something that we really, really need to address. And this is Albert Sabin, and this is Jonas Salk. They were the inventors of two different polio vaccines. One's oral, one's injection. And they did not put their pharmaceuticals on patent. They said, hey, this is something that's really going to save kids. It's going to save lives. It's going to save the world. And both of them didn't want to make money off of it. And so they never put it on patent. And the point of pharmaceutical patents is for the pharmaceutical companies to regenerate all of the R&D, the research and development funds that they put into making the pharmaceutical. And I am fairly certain that Pfizer and Moderna and J&J have more than made up for the funds, or even got, in the case of Moderna, got paid for the research and development. So that's a little bit of me getting on a high horse, and I apologize, but I think that it would definitely benefit the world to take vaccines off patents, so every country can make their own vaccines and update the vaccines as we need them. A little bit of a positive note, I was talking about that this virus has a way to track it a bit easier, and it's called the S-target drop, or the S-drop. Basically, when you do a PCR test, it's checking for different areas of the genetic code of the virus, and this virus has a little deletion in the spike protein that actually causes the S to drop out of the PCR signal. So when you see a bunch of other signals going up, but the S signal is not going down, or is staying down, you can assume that this, in the setting of that Delta doesn't have this, the worldwide prevalence of Delta is really, really high. You're most likely encountering this virus, or Alpha actually had the same deletion. So not thinking that Alpha is going to make a resurgence, it's more likely this virus, but basically it makes it a lot easier to track. So that's a good thing. And we can see in South Africa, the S drop actually just skyrocketed over the last couple weeks. This is one thing that we were seeing as well that caused alarm bells, is that the sequencing of the Omicron virus just really shot up here. This little sliver in blue, you can see in South Africa was predominantly beta, and then Delta took over, and then all of a sudden Omicron came on and shot up. But has to be taken in context of that the case loads were definitely decreasing and very, very low. So this could be what they call a founder effect, meaning if there's just one large outbreak with one virus, that's the only type of variant, with one variant, that's the only variant that you're going to see. So that's a possibility there, but we still aren't seeing much Delta virus. So something that just we need to wait and see. So it could be a founder effect. We need to see if it's really going to take hold in other populations, and we've heard that it's been spreading other places as well. And I'll get into that in a second. Here is some interesting data from it's wastewater data. So basically, a really a very accurate way of tracking how much coronavirus is in a population is to test wastewater, so sewer water, and they spin it down and get just sort of the liquid part, and they see how many copies of the RNA, COVID RNA, are in there. And you can see these gray bars are the cases in an area of South Africa. It's actually in Pretoria, a little bit north of Johannesburg, where the major outbreak of Omicron is happening now. You can see this is when the Delta virus started. This is the Delta wave. You can see the levels, this dotted level here, this red dot, is the levels of COVID RNA in the sewer water, rose with the case numbers, and then it came down as the case numbers came down. But what we're seeing now is a very, very rapid and robust rise of the COVID in the RNA, COVID RNA in the sewer water, but we're not seeing the case rise yet. So I could take this two ways. I could take it in a positive way, in that, all right, so we're having a lot of COVID because we're seeing a lot of it in the sewer water, but the cases aren't up yet. So maybe there's a high rate of asymptomatics, or maybe it's a very mild disease. So that's where one hypothesis. The other hypothesis is that COVID, this way of tracking COVID, is actually a leading indicator, kind of like percent positivity is a leading indicator to hospitalization. The amount of COVID RNA in wastewater is a leading indicator to case numbers. So normally it's about a week-ish. I've seen reports of 2 to 2 weeks, 2 days to 2 weeks, that it's a leading indicator. So maybe it's just that these caseloads have really skyrocketed, and we just haven't gotten to the case numbers. They haven't got sick enough yet. They haven't approached the hospital yet. So you could take it either way, a positive or a negative. But when you look at the hospitalizations in the same area where the outbreak of Omicron is happening, they had 135 2 to 3 weeks ago, and just last week they had 580. So that's an increase of 300%. But the caveat being is that the different colors here, the teal and the green, are private and public systems. And so South Africa is very starkly diversified when it comes to medical care. I spent a month there teaching in Johannesburg at a trauma hospital after I graduated residency, and it was very stark, the difference between the care that the public would get versus the people who were able to afford private insurance. And so the testing systems may not be quite aligned yet. They also are saying here, right in this description here, that new facilities are joining, and so that may change. So it's tough to say, but definitely hospitalizations seem to be increasing, and so that would portend that this is not as a really, really mild illness, because a 300% increase in hospitalizations in 2 to 3 weeks is a pretty fast increase. That being, maybe it's just more hospitals are coming on to this surveillance system, so it's tough to say with this as well. We've seen that it also has gone in a lot of different places. The travel bans from specific countries are really not going to work. This is most likely already in the United States in some capacity. Whether we see it this week or next, probably. I can't say with 100% certainty. There's 2 major flights that head out of Johannesburg. One goes to Atlanta, one goes to Newark. So that might be one of the first places I would suspect to see it. But also if it's in the UK and in France, East Coast, LA is definitely a possibility as well. So to summarize, is it more transmissible? Evidence, if I had to guess and you were to hold me down, Mel, and you were to demand that I tell you the answer to these 3 questions, with the caveat being that this could change by tomorrow or in the next week, absolutely. If I was to guess right now, do I think this variant is more transmissible? Probably. The WHO thinks there's evidence for that as well. Do I think it's more severe than Delta? I'm fairly confident that it's not more severe, so that's a good thing. Is it less? Is it a milder disease? I think the jury's still out on that. Needs more time to say. And can it evade immunity and vaccines? Delta does as well. We've seen that, especially when our immunity wanes. I think there is more of a capacity for this variant. I would hedge, and this is a large hedge, to evade immunity in our vaccines, not completely, but partially, than other variants. So that would be my guesses, and I emphasize guesses at the moment. What can we do? I want to point everyone to this middle, or this red kind of odd shaped, this is basically just a statistical shape, but we should all be getting our boosters if you haven't already. The CDC actually just today, just this afternoon, announced that they change in policy, and it was about time. The data was there for quite a while, that every adult should, not may, but should be getting a booster vaccine if you're more than 6 months out. So you don't have to have any immunocompromise or be high risk. It's just you should after 6 months, because this is somebody who got 2 vaccines about 30 days after their second vaccine. They've got a pretty good level of immunity, antibody levels. After 6 months, their antibody levels drop down to here. If you get just that one booster, so the third shot, you actually get much higher antibody levels than even when you had 2 shots. So definitely, if this variant does turn out to be more infectious, more in chance of reinfection, a booster is definitely going to help you out here. Now, over here on this left side is somebody who's had COVID, but hasn't gotten any vaccine. This is about 30 days after somebody who's had COVID. Their antibody levels are much lower than any of these other here. Now, it's not the only element to immunity. There's also the T cell, the innate immunity, but their antibody levels are lower than anybody else. Now, if they were to go ahead and just get vaccinated, they'd have very, very good levels. So I encourage anybody who's on the fence to go ahead and boost your antibody levels, and definitely in consideration for what's happening with this variant. And then if somebody was exposed but didn't know it, but had a positive antibody and got vaccinated, they're about the same as somebody who's never had COVID and who got 2 vaccines. So over here on the left is just a blow up of how much higher your antibody levels get, almost 25 times higher when you get the booster from the pre-booster. So it's definitely a very, very good idea. And then finally, other good news is the antivirals are about to be released, we hope. We've got the one from Merck, which data is still mixed. I want to see a little bit more. It's showing about a 50 to 30% effective rate with some side effects that really need to be parsed out a bit more. And then the Pfizer medication, is showing about a 80 to 90% effectiveness. And those announcements should be hopefully sometime before Christmas. So those are good things and hopeful things that will hopefully chop the legs off of Delta, because that's definitely still the highest risk for us, and Omicron. And so what other people are saying, other national experts are saying about the travel bans, what we should be doing about travel. This is Dr. Liana Wen, and she said, now that Omicron is in so many countries, we should be quarantining and retesting all travelers, and mandatory testing quarantine for returning Americans from South Africa. And Dr. Eric Ding, he's a little bit controversial. Some have called him alarmist, but I believe his travel remarks are right on line with what Dr. Wen said, and what we've all been saying is that entry testing for all disembarking at airports. That means when you arrive, get an entry test, plus follow-up testing 3 to 5 days after, possible home quarantine until negative follow-up test. I think those are probably some really good recommendations. All right, I have blabbed on and talked long enough. How do I get back to you, Mel? There we go. All right, that was a mouthful. How many questions are there?
Charlie, welcome. I got a lot of questions. I can tell you that. There's a lot of questions. How you
Hey,
doing,
Charlie.
Charles? You're muted, Charles.
How's that?
Oh, yeah, loud and clear.
Well, I have to say, from what I gathered and what I caught from that presentation, it seems like, well, it appears that you have covered the gamut from A through Z for now. But I think the thing that worries me are those areas where you expounded upon that, the jury's still out. We got to wait and see what happens. And that's what happens. That's what happened the last time when we had to wait and see, right? When Delta finally made landfall, and we just didn't know how it was going to react, and it just went sideways on us. So, how's your take on it right now? I know you need to see some other things happening, but Doc, what's your gut feeling telling you? And this is just as a person, not as a doctor.
Sure.
but somebody who's knowledgeable about this. I think there's a lot of lay people watching tonight. I saw some of the comments. Some felt they got lost, but nevertheless, the information is solid. I mean,
I
Hey,
apologize for those who got
Char,
lost.
I tell you
That's
what,
my fault.
tomorrow I'm going to go to the state.
yeah.
I'm going to take my test to become a doctor in Hawaii, and I bet I can pass after that class that we just had.
No,
I love
it's
it.
good. It's good because I gotta say this much: when you get information like that and it's very challenging, it challenges you to want to be better at understanding what's going on instead of just being blasé about it and just say, well, this and that. But as a resident of Hawaii, Doc, what's your gut feeling telling you right now?
Sure. Yeah, and I apologize for losing people. I'll summarize basically what I meant by all of that is that the jury is still out. Is this more transmissible? Is it more severe? Does it cause more reinfection and higher rates of reinfection? I could venture a guess on all of those questions, and the one I'm most comfortable guessing about is it going to have a higher rate of reinfection? That's probably most likely that I think is going to happen. It's going to have a higher breakthrough infection, higher chance, especially for somebody who hasn't gotten vaccinated and is relying on natural immunity from either Delta or a prior variant. Like I think they may be in trouble and need to get a vaccine pronto. Whether it causes mild disease, I can't conclusively say one way or the other. It's just too early. And we heard, like you said, Charlie, that this is sort of the same take that a lot of people took towards Delta at first, right?
Right.
It's like, it reminds me of one of the best quotes I've ever heard from Dr. Fauci in the beginning of this pandemic is, if it feels like you're overreacting, you're probably doing the right thing. And I'd like Hawaii to be more cautious. And the simple fact is that the data and the science has been very robust that 2 vaccines wane. And now the CDC has even said that everybody should get a third, every adult should get a third vaccine, yet we're still allowing people with 2 vaccines that maybe they are 10 months out, 8 months out, longer, to travel without a test. And then we know that a single test is not effective in catching a population base of COVID. So that's discouraging that hasn't changed yet.
Okay. So
Hey, Doc,
as real quickly with a follow-up question, if I could, Mel. So now as an emergency room physician, given and having dealt with some COVID patients, severe COVID patients, if an individual doesn't have an underlying condition and they get this, what could they possibly be facing that probably be the most horrific? Would it be the respiratory attacks, or would it be a combination of things? Respiratory plus, if the person has no underlying condition.
Sure. Yeah. The thing that really puts people into trouble first is the respiratory system. Basically, there's a lot of inflammation that goes on in the blood vessels and the lungs surrounding the lungs. And yeah, you are struggling to breathe. If you've ever felt like you were breathing out of not quite of a straw, but you couldn't ever get much air or air hunger, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. You're breathing as fast as you can, yet you still feel out of breath. It's not pleasant. And that would be the first thing and the worst thing to exhibit, other than hypercoagulability or blood clots. That could cause a stroke, that could cause a clot to the lungs, that could cause a heart attack as well. Could cause clotting in the legs, that can be emergency as well. So those would be the acute, really fast things. There's a litany of ways that this virus can really take you down.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mel.
hey, Doc. No problem. Thank you for asking. Scotty, someone had Janelle said it was and for those of you that got lost, I apologize. We're gonna break it down now as we get into the regular talk. But I thought it was very important, and for many of us that actually follow and listen to a lot of these experts, it made a lot of sense. So I apologize for those that didn't, but we're going to get into the normal regular talk. But I know you talked about the vaccines and the therapeutics. Now, one of our viewers said they got lost, and Scotty replied, "Bottom line, our vaccines and therapeutics don't work as well because of its shape." Is that something that we should be concerned about? I know you talked about the connecting, and it can connect. What I didn't hear you say that the vaccines and therapeutics don't work as well. I think for the most part we just don't know. It's too soon to even tell what's going to work and what won't work.
Yep, that's the answer. Is it's too soon to tell exactly. We have some laboratory data and really supercomputer data, the computational data that when they did the computer folded the spike protein on its own and tried to attach, via their complex algorithms, tried to attach antibodies to that spike protein. These were the mutations that affected those antibodies the most, and this variant has some of those mutations. But what it's going to affect the most is our monoclonal antibodies, because our body really takes when you develop a antibody response to any pathogen. It could be strep throat or any virus. Really, your body takes a 3D picture, and it's like how it takes a 3D picture of the outside of that virus, and how many ways can I fit the antibody onto that spike protein. And it's looking almost like a 3D picture, and it's finding the best antibody that's going to latch on the best, and that's what it makes a lot of. And it's not just one; it's going to be multiple. It could be hundreds. It could be thousands in some cases. But that's why we call it a polyclonal response. There's lots of different types of antibodies, but there's a few that work the best and work the most. So these mutations have shown that the few of the antibodies that work the best may be impacted because it's changing that shape, and so that antibody no longer can fit tightly or can fit at all sometimes. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks.
So so let me ask you this other question, and I again I want to come from a real simplistic point of view, and that is, as this virus is progressing, I guess the science and what's ever available has it progressing in a certain way. Do you know if any has ever jumped off the rails and went completely sideways in developing that it's never been seen before? That causes some in the science field to get really worried, because now it's gaining this appearance that maybe what we do have, such as the vaccines and boosters, may not work on it at all. Just from an asking point of view.
To my knowledge, the the variants that popped out of people with chronic infections who were immunosuppressed came out with the strangest looking variants, the most changed variants. But this is the one that a lot of those variants actually weren't good at. They were transmitting to other people, and so they kind of just they may have gotten to one other person or just gotten. They were like, "Oh, this is interesting. Looks like a really scary variant, but it didn't go anywhere." And so thinking of the combination and permutation of how many people are getting infected across the world and how many potential variants could be popping out of who knows where, we should have seen something like this, or we were expecting something like this variant to come up. And that's the reason why South Africa sounded the alarm bells quickly. It's like, ooh, molecularly, on a molecular basis, when we look at the mutations, this has the potential to be worrisome, but it also has a combination of mutations that we don't know how those are going to interact yet in the real world sense. So if I could say it in one sentence, on a mutational level, there's some things that look a bit worrisome. In the real world, we don't know how it's playing out yet.
Well, I think we learned from Delta. I think all the countries in the world learned from Delta that it can get ugly really quickly. So I saw a video I posted from Dr. Vong today. Are we overreacting? And he as well as what you've been saying. No, we got to buy us some time. Now, you mentioned the S protein, and again, for those of you that uh, just came on or missed that part, when we run the PCR test, there's certain things. I'm going to make it very, very simple. There's three things on the PCR test that trigger a positive result. Now, with the uh, Omicron, one drops out.
Correct. Yep.
That's the S. The S protein doesn't show up.
Yep. And S for
Okay.
spike. So if that makes it
Okay.
easier.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
either way, there's three. One of them, when it doesn't show up, I was watching a doctor's video that said when they do a PCR test and the S component is missing, you can be almost positive it's the Omicron.
Yeah. In this day and age, when we've got basically the predominant variant right now across the world is Delta, and Delta does not have the S dropout. So if you're starting to see the S drop out in your PCR test, it's more than likely, if not almost certain, that it's this variant. And that's a good thing because we can detect it quicker actually than having to send it to the sample to the lab, a special lab where they have to actually parse out each little sequence of the virus rather than the PCR. We just got a couple things we look at and be like, oh, okay, that's an S dropout. That's possibly an Omicron variant.
Okay, so my concern is when they interviewed Dr. Kemble on the news tonight, she said that she mentioned exactly that S spike, whatever, is missing. But she said, we will send it to a lab, which will take a week or two to get the genome sequencing down to confirm
Yep.
if, in fact, it's Omicron.
Right.
But if we wait a week or two and it is Omicron, might be a little too late. I think what I'm hearing from everywhere else is when they get that missing component on the PCR, they'll consider it. Yes, they're going to send it off to testing, but they're going to assume that it is the Omicron.
Yes, yeah, they'll probably say something like it's a probable case we're confirming now, which has been what we've seen, as they're detecting possible variants in, the plane from Johannesburg to the Netherlands. They had 60 positive cases, 10% positivity rate, and they sent them all for confirmation. They suspected 13, and then they sent them all for that genetic confirmation, and the 13 turned out to be Omicron. But that took a while. That took a couple of days to confirm. So my educated hunch is that they'll confirm or say probable case and then confirm with that genetic test.
Okay. And just one other question. Much has been said about the herd immunity, that if in fact this virus or this variant does have minimal symptoms or minimum illness, light illness, that if that circulates in the community, does that contribute towards the herd immunity for wherever this virus may be, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Hawaii?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Herd immunity is kind of like a moving target, and it all depends on if there's a new variant out there that can partially escape immunity, then herd immunity. Now there's maybe 20 to 30% of, and I don't know the number, I'm just putting something out there. There's now 20 to 30% of people who are now susceptible again. So it's like, we got here, and then now it's kind of like flu. Every year flu circulates because every year people get susceptible, and if we had reached flu herd immunity, we wouldn't see flu anymore. And so it's that the virus is changing enough that people become susceptible again, or their immune systems change to become susceptible.
So, Doc, is it possible? And again, this is just throwing it out there because getting some kind of knowledge is better than getting no knowledge at all, right? But is it possible that this thing can ramp up so quickly that instead of just looking at it from the position of Omicron, it can start popping out into several different directions of something equal or much stronger than Omicron itself. Is it possible doing that? Or it has to go one step at a time?
Um, Nothing. Yeah, there's no rules that it has to follow. That it has to go one step.
Okay.
Is the short answer.
Mhm.
We do know the common cold coronaviruses. Like there's 4 of them that circulate around the globe. They mix and match with each other. They do something called recombinate, where they 2 different variants or 2 different viruses infect the same cell, and they genetically sort through, and one comes out with different genes than the other one, and that they came in with as well. So if you've got Delta out there and you've got Omicron, there's nothing preventing them. And I don't want to say this is going to happen, but there's nothing preventing Delta and Omicron from getting together and seeing if they can produce something else. But not saying that's going to happen. Recombination events are something that does happen with coronaviruses. So it's possible.
I know we're getting a lot of questions about symptoms and vaccines and so forth. I think, Dr. O'Carroll, you made it clear. We just don't know yet. It's just too soon. The information is still, being received really in South Africa and other countries that have seen these cases pop up. But I think in the next couple of weeks we'll probably get a much better understanding of um, the symptoms. From what we can tell so far, from what I've been reading, it seems to be a little different. The symptoms unique, but not as severe as Delta. But we still don't know. I mean, and I think that's the scary part for many of us is we should be vigilant and cognizant of what's going on, and we shouldn't minimize the potential threat of this variant.
That's correct. The symptoms were, and I think it was taken a little bit out of context from some of the science journalists across the nation and across the globe, even, that they took there was one general practitioner in Pretoria, which is the area where a lot of the cases have emerged, who said she's seeing mostly mild symptoms, but where the large outbreaks are first occurring are in younger people and younger college students specifically. Not all of them, but a good significant portion of them. And what she said later down in the interview was, I'm not sure how this is going to affect older people or at-risk people. And so typical news, they don't include everything. And I'm not blaming journalists. Sometimes it just happens. But everything can be important. And again, Mel, like you said, we don't know. And I wouldn't jump to any conclusions that this is mild. Again, it's going back to Socrates and Plato. The ultimate wisdom is knowing what you don't know, and we don't know. We just don't know yet. So patience, yeah, and we should know. I think I saw a comment over there that a week to 2 weeks, we will know a lot more.
Oh,
So
I see Senate President Kochi is on. Happy anniversary, Senator Kochi. You enjoy. I hope you guys had a great anniversary. Thanks for jumping on again. I'm so happy when we got our elected officials come on the show and get educated. I appreciate that, Senator. Thank you so much.
so let's fast forward to our safe travels program. What we're getting from um, this variant? Do you think re-implementation of multiple testing should be in order if we want to stay ahead of the track, or what they're proposing right now is a wait and see? It, to me, sounds kind of disastrous, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, that's the same approach we took with Delta.
right.
Kind of a laissez-faire. We should be fine, and that definitely threw us a curveball.
Right.
And the first reports we we're just getting from India, where that they're finally having an outbreak when they haven't had one yet, and so that was kind of like what everybody played it off as. And then as it sort of took over, you saw cases increasing everywhere. And so what we have is we have a variant that has emerged, and it seems to be significant. We don't know exactly, is it going to displace Delta yet? There's evidence that it will. We don't know it for certain. And so this could end up being as significant as Delta. It could, and it could end up not being. And the best case scenario is that it's very transmissible. It can reinfect a lot of people, but it causes mild illness. That's the best case scenario, I think, because it will sort of supplant Delta, because we know Delta is quite a beast. But all to answer those three prime questions: is it transmissible? Is it severe? And can it reinfect? Those are still all up in the air. And I know that's frustrating for me to tell you guys, and probably even more frustrating to hear. So,
Well, we should have learned from Delta, and we haven't. When I say we, I'm talking about our decision makers. We haven't learned. It is quite clear, right? Today, the lieutenant governor talked about the safe travels. One of the questions was about, if we need to, are we able to revamp safe travels, or what I call unsafe travels? I don't even know how you can even call it safe travels, but whatever. And he came up and he said we don't have enough tests to test post arrival. He says, they asked him, how long would it take if this variant shows up on our shores and it's bad? How long would it take? He said it would take a couple of weeks. We would have to allow for travelers to change their flight plans. I mean, this guy is in another world. He's not thinking about the dangers of this virus. Virus meaning all the variants, whether it's Delta or Omicron or whatever. But the fact that he's saying we don't have enough tests, we have enough tests that we're willing to buy. That's the bottom line. We have enough. We will have enough tests, depending on how much we're willing to buy. I I don't get it, and it doesn't
yeah.
seem like he gets it. Um, it doesn't seem like he's, and I don't know who makes the final call, whether it's the governor or him, but he has. I'm sure he has some influence. But to say that we're in a good place right now, that we shouldn't be concerned, we shouldn't be scared, and that the safe travel plans in place should be sufficient. I do not think that's correct.
Yeah, it just seems more like there isn't a want to do it rather than we can't, um, because there's a lot of rapid antigen tests out there, more brands coming every day, and they're getting fairly inexpensive. $5 to some even less when you buy them in bulk. And so those are very good at screening if somebody's contagious, and they're definitely an option. Um, and it's very evident that Hawaii's policies aren't really following science-based guidelines, because the CDC is even posting that, if you got tested 3 days ago, like, you could still be turning positive and be pre-symptomatic. Like, I saw that today on their travel and holiday recommendations. And then also the science, as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, has shown that 3 boosters are really what is considered, especially like in places like Israel, fully vaccinated. And that's been conclusive for months now. And the CDC is recommending every adult should get booster, but travel-wise, we're still letting people with 2. And those that are second shot maybe 10 months out or even longer. And so that's definitely a big sieve as well, letting a lot of infections in.
Yeah, yeah, it's been said that the testing component will be critical. That in fact, what you just said, we boast about a 70, I think it was 71.2% vaccination rate in the state of Hawaii right now. Some islands are much lower, but when you add in the waning of the vaccinations, the waning of the immunity, some experts are saying you're not fully vaccinated until you get the booster. So the number is going to be a lot less than 71.2%
Yeah.
statewide, total vaccinated, and we may end up with boosters every year.
Yeah,
And
this I think a lot of experts, when this virus first came out and we saw how it was developing, is this is likely going to turn into something like influenza, where you have to get one at least a year, just because it's the simple fact that it changes rapidly. And that's why we have to get an influenza vaccine yearly, is that it changes quickly. The flu you saw last year is very different from the flu you'll see the next year. So it was looking like this is going to turn into something similar to that. On what rapidity, is it biannual or annual? We can't tell yet. What we're seeing though is that just like flu, this virus can infect multiple different species, right? It can infect cats, it can infect deer, it can infect mice, it can infect mink, which is a cat family. And so just like flu can infect pigs and birds, and that's where we get those nasty strains, right? Is pig flu or swine flu and avian flu. So we haven't seen something nasty come out of an animal yet. We saw a variant come out of the mink farms, but it was not very strong. It did transmit a little bit, but it wasn't strong. But that's also something that the world needs to keep an eye on, and is keeping an eye on, is like what are the strains that are happening, not just in bats where we think this originated from, but now North American deer mice and deer as well.
wow.
I'm not trying to be alarmist, Janelle. I apologize.
No,
I'm just being real that it's a possibility, and it's prudent that our nation and the world they're actually screening deers and they're screening mice and keeping an eye on it. There's some scientist out there who's in a field who's catching a mice in North America and in Canada who is looking out for what types of coronavirus are in them. So I think you can feel good about it rather than scared. So
hey Doc, real quick, while you're on the waning immunity, and with this new variant, any idea how long it would take our vaccine or the pharmaceutical companies to adapt or create a new vaccine for this new variant?
sure.
I understand it didn't take that long.
They wouldn't have to do the large phase 3 trials because they're just changing, a little bit of the spike protein sequence. And they are already, Moderna and Pfizer and J&J have all announced that they're working towards it already. And about 100 days, so
Okay.
pretty quick. Yep.
Well, one last thing, Doc. So our hospitals right now, if we had a major breakout, it's already been foretelling with what happened with Delta. If this thing ramps up beyond what Delta did to us, what do we do? I mean, I don't want to be, like you said, an alarmist, but what 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 do we do? Because I think if we err on the side of caution and we take all the preventative measures, right? I think we learn faster. It's like somebody getting whacked in the face. You don't want that feeling again, so you don't leave yourself open to get whacked in the face one more time. So I think we learned our lesson from Delta. We just have to apply it with this, knowing that this thing might be a little bit worse than Delta. And I'm just wondering how our healthcare systems will fare this time around.
Sure. Yeah. The good news is we were slapped, Charlie, and anytime
Mm.
you are slapped, you remember what it feels like, and we can
Yep.
plan, and we know we know what worked, and
Right.
we know what our capacity is. Bad news is it could happen again, and we don't want it to happen again. And even if if it's not Omicron, then Delta is still out there and has shown quite a huge capacity to reinfect people, as we're seeing in Europe. Um, and yeah, I'm not sure what our staffing levels are in Hawaii anymore. I'm not abreast of, we did have to rely on quite a large amount of travel nurses during that large break. My guess is that some of them are gone, if not the majority or even all of them. But we would have to re-up that, make sure our oxygen capacity is more robust, which we may have already done already and had some reserves. But yeah, I'm actually optimistic in that sense that we've run through that before, and that I think we can run through it again. Do I want to see it happen? Do I think it should happen again? No, but I'm optimistic about that point.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, the focus has now changed over to Omicron, and yet we still have Delta. We still have the holiday, the Thanksgiving weekends, the gatherings. We got Christmas coming up. We still have a lot of vulnerable people here in our state. Delta is not gone. And I think a lot of people now are just so entrenched with Omicron, and they're not thinking about Delta like maybe Delta is a stepchild, but we still got to focus on Delta. We still got to realize we know that the COVID patients in the hospitals have dropped significantly, but the non-COVID patients don't stop when the COVID outbreaks stop. People still get sick, people still get surgeries, people still get into accidents. And from all the healthcare people that I talk to offline, our hospitals aren't empty. So we gotta be aware of this all the time, not just during spikes.
Yep, absolutely. And even a bad flu season could not get nearly quite as bad as we saw in a Delta spike this summer, but would have glimmers of it on a day, not on a consistent basis. And so Hawaii does have the lowest ICU capacity per capita in the United States, and we're out here in the Pacific without anybody to ship um, patients to if we don't have an open bed. So that, in a sense, is why we have to be more cautious. Is that we have a finite capacity that we can't run over, and that's exactly, yeah. That's your point, Mel. Is that we got to be a bit more prudent and a bit more cautious, and I think it's wise to keep our eyes open and not assume anything just yet, because the answers aren't there.
It's almost like a hurricane coming our way, and you still prepare. You still do what you got to do to prepare as if it's coming, and I don't see that in our state, and that's concerning. Doc, last question before we wrap this up. Um, Merck is heading to the FDA to get a EUA approval on a treatment drug. Uh, that's got to be good news.
Yeah, yeah, Merck. Looking forward to anything that we can give to patients early, and give it to them easily. Like an oral pill. Um, the efficacy has been waning a bit from 50% to 30%, but that's still, up there with monoclonal antibodies and how effective they are, against at least Delta, and the prior variants. And really excited about Pfizer as well. If it can maintain an efficacy of 90%, that would be a game changer. Absolutely. The challenge would be is manufacturing that many tablets. Because it's a 5-day course, and I believe the Pfizer, I can't remember the daily dosing. One of them is 4 days or 4 times a day, or 4 pills a day, excuse me. So it's quite a bit of manufacturing, but we've shown the capacity to do it with vaccines. But absolutely, it would help. If you got a rapid test at home, you test positive. If you call or telemedicine your physician, be like, "Hey, I tested positive." They send you it in the mail or to the pharmacy, and that's how you prevent a hospitalization or a bad illness like that. That is a dream for a physician to come into.
And the reason I bring that up, Doc, is there's a strange phenomenon going on right now. I don't know if you've noticed, but all of those anti-vaxxers that were screaming out loud that the vaccine was only had an EUA approval, only had an EUA, it's not safe. It didn't get full approval, but these, and I know this because I see their posts on Facebook. Now they're saying, I'm going to get the Merck pill. Thank God we got the Merck pill. And the Merck pill is seeking EUA approval just as the vaccine did. So we don't, I mean, but you see what I'm trying to say? We got that phenomenon of anti-vaxxers that are out there because they are concerned that we didn't test the vaccine enough, not enough to get a full approval, but they're okay with the pill. They're
Yeah.
okay with the pill going through the same process in a quicker time span, but they're okay with that, but not the vaccine. It's I think it's an interesting phenomenon. That's the only reason I brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And there has even been some notable side effects with the Merck pill. One being some possible effects for people who are pregnant and their baby, having some teratogenic effects. Um, but that all needs to be parsed out a bit more. I don't have the full data, and the EUA will probably reveal all of that. But there's some legitimate side effect concerns with the Merck pill, not for everyone, but for some people. And but there wasn't for vaccines, and so yeah, it's even another reason that is a big question, Mel. I have the same one. I hadn't seen or any of the anti-vaxxers say that, but that's just obviously a staunch non-scientific view of vaccines, unfortunately.
Mhm. Charlie, any other questions before we hear from Doc's final closing comments?
No, I think being on the alert, it occupies you in a good way. It makes you realize that, hey, as long as you're being overly cautious, then the safety component to that being overly cautious just happens naturally. So you can take care of yourself. You don't have to strain. And when you have to work at it, I think that's where the complacency comes in, because they're always having to remember what corner has that boogeyman waiting around the corner. This way, you just be cautious and just be real uh, bullheaded about it until the thing blows over, if you can, and that way you keep yourself safe for longer. I think.
Yes, sir. Wise words from a wise man. Doc, any closing thoughts for our viewers? Again, thank you so much, man, for joining us
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah, the same things that worked in the past, the non-pharmaceutical interventions are going to work for Omicron. So masks, make sure there's good ventilation in wherever you're going, and keep the crowd levels indoors to a minimum, especially between households. And then if you haven't gotten a vaccine yet, get it. And if you haven't gotten a booster, and 6 months is around June 1st. So if your second vaccine was before June 1st, if I'm doing the math correctly, you're due a booster, and it'll definitely see you well through this holiday season and into the new year. Um, Other than that, yeah, no need to panic. I'm sure all the science is going to get out there, and we'll do what we need to when it does.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Charles.
Well, I first would like to apologize to everyone I came on late, but I left work late again. Uh, I can't help but say, think about, seeing our good friend, Darragh O'Carroll. But I'm so glad he's on tonight. And thank you, Mel, for getting in touch with him. And, to our viewers out there, as you can tell, things are shifting ever so quickly. But we guarantee you we'll bring as much information as we can. And hopefully it'll be worthwhile for you. Hopefully it'll take you to a place where you can really stay in touch with your safer side of yourself, and to keep you and your family safe at all times. So I just want to say thank you again to our guests. Thank you to all the viewers tonight. Thank you for your many questions. But mostly, I just want to thank the people of Hawaii who are taking this very, very seriously. And as they do whatever they can to keep their loved ones safe. Just remember, we can do everything with kindness. And so sometimes when we have to distance ourselves, we don't have to be an okole when we do it. We can smile, but do it just to keep ourselves safe. Wear a mask. We don't have to tell anybody off just because they don't want to take safety precautions, but we can do a lot of things by just keeping ourselves away from that danger. So I just want to say thank you to all the people who fight you. Mel?
All right, all right. And to everybody, I just want to show off my shirt that just came in. The Village, Charles. I can drop yours off tomorrow at the airport. I got one for you as well. But it boils down to this, Village.
Yep.
Stay safe, guys. We all know what we got to do. I think Doc O'Carroll made it very clear. Nothing has changed, whether it's Delta, Omicron, whatever the hell. It's all the same, right? We cannot control what the governor and the lieutenant governor does, but we can control what we do. So if you're not vaccinated or not boosted, go get it done. Wear your mask, disinfect. It is a crappy year. It's a crappy 2 years. And I remember when we all said, can't wait for 2020 to be over. Well, damn, 2020 was over, and then we got 2021. Now we cannot wait for 2021, but now we got a new variant.
Hmm.
Hopefully, it fizzles out like most of the hurricanes that hit our way. But Doc, I appreciate you coming on. I got to tell you, a lot of the data, you see, that's the difference between people like Dr. O'Carroll and the YouTube videos that are going viral on the internet. Yeah, Dr. O'Carroll backs his stuff up with the data, the stats, versus those guys that dress up like doctors, act like doctors, and tell you that we're fear mongers. So if you didn't understand, go back and rewatch it and you'll get it. I promise you. All right. So Doc, thank you. Stay safe. It's nice to see you again. Glad everything worked out. Your eyes look sexy. The
Yep.
plastic
Yep.
plastic
I
surgeon
know.
did a
I
good
got plastic
job.
surgery now, so it's
Yeah, man. It's
plus.
damn. So, but it really is good to have you back, and we're looking forward to have you back on as things develop. Appreciate you, my friend.
Yep. Very
To the
much.
Appreciate you guys.
viewers, guys, Wednesday night, Dr. Miskovich, Dr. Akiona, and on December 8th, 1 week from Wednesday, 1 week from Wednesday, Dr. Jerome Kim will be back in the house to share with us some international news about COVID, Omicron, and the new Star Wars movie. All right, guys, we'll see you guys on Wednesday. You guys take care. God bless. We love y'all.